Ladies and gentlemen, there's a side of every person that rarely steps into the light. Not because it isn't there, but because the world doesn't always ask to see it. The world asks for strength. It demands certainty. It rewards confidence. And in that constant performance of power, emotion becomes a silent language, felt deeply, but rarely spoken aloud. Tonight, I want to take you into that silent space. The place behind the equations, the rockets, the screens, the engineering blueprints, the timelines, and the sleepless nights. The place where ambition meets fear, where resilience meets pain, and where human emotion quietly shapes the future. Most people think of innovation as a rational process: ideas, models, data, execution. But emotion is the invisible engine behind it all. It's the pulse beneath the steel, the breath behind every calculation. We imagine the great innovators as logical machines, driven by pure intellect, immune to the vulnerabilities that shape ordinary lives. That's not true. The reality is far more human, and in that humanity lies the real story. There's a peculiar kind of loneliness that comes with chasing something bigger than yourself. It's not the loneliness of being alone in a room. It's the feeling of being surrounded by people who can't fully see the storm inside your head. Imagine carrying a vision that's so large it barely fits inside your own mind, and trying to explain it to a world still negotiating its doubts. You can't always share the weight of that vision. Not because you don't want to, but because language itself sometimes fails to translate the magnitude of what you're holding. Emotionally, this creates a paradox. On one hand, there's extraordinary drive, a fire that refuses to dim. On the other hand, there's this quiet ache of distance. Because the higher you climb towards something extraordinary, the fewer people truly understand what you're feeling at the summit. Most see the results, the launches, the inventions, the triumphs. Few see the nights when everything feels fragile, when the weight of the dream presses against the fragile structure of the human heart. In neuroscience, emotion and logic aren't separate entities. They are deeply intertwined. Decisions that seem purely rational are laced with emotional signatures. The prefrontal cortex, which governs rational thought, is in constant conversation with the limbic system, where emotion lives. Even the boldest technological leaps are whispered first in the language of feeling: hope, fear, love, longing, pain, courage. Emotion is the first spark. Logic is the structure that follows. I remember sitting alone, long after everyone had left, in a silent room that smelled faintly of machine oil and burnt metal. It was a night after something big, a moment that looked, from the outside, like a win. Cameras had captured smiles. Headlines had celebrated progress. But deep inside, I felt the strangest mix of relief and hollow exhaustion. That's the part people never really see. You can build something extraordinary and still feel the echo of every near collapse that came before it. What I've learned is that emotion is not the enemy of innovation. It's its anchor. Without it, ambition floats aimlessly, untethered, cold, mechanical. But when emotion is acknowledged, when it's understood not as a weakness, but as a map of where the soul wants to go, everything changes. Emotion gives innovation its direction. It turns technology from an idea into a human story. Many assume that people who lead ambitious missions must be emotionally invincible, that they must have some hidden reservoir of superhuman strength. But strength is often built in layers of quiet heartbreak. Every bold step forward carries the memory of steps that almost failed. And sometimes, it's not the grand victories that shape you. It's the quiet, bruising moments when you felt close to giving up, but didn't. I've spent countless nights staring up at a dark ceiling, the sound of machinery humming in the distance, wondering if the world would ever truly understand why this matters. The truth is, no matter how extraordinary a mission becomes, it always begins with something profoundly personal: a memory, a dream, a wound. A moment when the world said, "Impossible," and something deep inside whispered, "Try anyway." Emotions don't just color these moments, they carve them into the architecture of your identity. Neuroscientists talk about emotional memory as being far more durable than logical memory. A formula might fade, A date might be forgotten. But the way something made you feel, it lingers. It shapes every choice you make afterward. If you've ever felt dismissed, you build in defiance. If you've ever felt wonder, you build to keep it alive. If you've ever felt heartbreak, you build to prove it didn't break you completely. This is why so many people misunderstand the nature of relentless ambition. It's not always ego. Often, it's the language through which emotion speaks. Some build to prove something to the world. Others build because if they don't, the weight of their own unspoken feelings might drown them. There's a concept in effective neuroscience about emotional resonance. The idea that emotions are not isolated signals, but waves that can synchronize across individuals. When a person carries deep emotion into their work, it radiates. People can feel it even when it's not spoken. That's why a mission driven by genuine feeling moves people more powerfully than one built on cold strategy alone. Emotion is contagious. It's why a single sentence spoken with true conviction can move thousands, while a perfectly crafted speech without feeling can leave a room silent but unmoved. Behind every bold vision is an emotional landscape no one fully sees. There are fears of failure, of time running out, of letting people down. There are small, human joys, like the quiet satisfaction of fixing something that once seemed impossible. There are moments of grief, when something or someone you cared about is lost in the pursuit of something bigger. There are moments of fragile hope, when the future feels like it might be just barely within reach. When I look back at certain moments, what I remember isn't the numbers or the data. It's the trembling in my chest, when everything depended on a single decision. It's the way my hands shook before pressing a button that would define years of work. It's the stillness that comes just before a leap. That stillness isn't cold logic. It's emotion, raw, human, unfiltered. The emotional side of a life lived in high stakes is often misunderstood. Some think it's hidden because it's shameful. In truth, it's hidden because it's sacred. It's the part of you that holds everything together when the surface looks calm, but the ground underneath is shifting. Emotion doesn't weaken a person who carries a vision. It gives them something to lose. And when you have something to lose, your will sharpens into something far stronger than ambition alone. I've spoken to engineers, scientists, dreamers, and skeptics. And in every one of them, beneath the layers of intellect and professionalism, there's always a heartbeat of emotion guiding their choices. A scientist might frame it as curiosity, an engineer might call it precision. But if you look closely, it's emotion wearing different names. Curiosity is a form of wonder. Precision is the desire to protect what matters. Ambition is the echo of something personal. In the early days, when the odds were so thin they almost disappeared into the dark, emotion wasn't a distraction. It was fuel. Fear of failure can paralyze some, but in the right form it becomes a compass, a reminder of what can't be allowed to happen. Love, for people, for possibility, for the idea of a better world, turns sleepless nights into necessary hours. Pain turns into resolve. There was a night, long before the world was paying attention, when it seemed like everything might end. No one would have known. From the outside, it looked like quiet work, but inside, the emotional weight felt unbearable. A single mistake would have meant the end of years of labor, the collapse of something that lived more like a heartbeat than a project. I sat there, surrounded by blinking lights, cables, scattered papers, and the soft, relentless ticking of a clock. It's strange how, in moments like that, the mind doesn't just calculate outcomes. It replays every emotional thread that led you there, the faces of people who believed in you, the ones who doubted you, the promises you made to yourself, the quiet moments when no one else was looking and you whispered, "I'll find a way." In those moments, emotion becomes gravity. It pulls you back to why you started in the first place. Science tells us that human emotion is inseparable from decision-making. In fact, people with damaged emotional centers in their brains often can't make even simple choices. Emotion doesn't just color our decisions, it enables them. Without emotion, ambition is directionless. Without ambition, emotion has no outlet. Together, they create something extraordinary. I've often thought about what it means to carry an emotional burden while the world expects certainty. To stand on a stage, or in a control room, or at the edge of some impossible leap, and keep your hands steady while your heart is shaking. It's not about pretending the emotion isn't there. It's about letting it live inside you, without letting it control you. The greatest emotional skill I've ever learned is not fearlessness. It's learning to let fear walk beside you without letting it lead. Fear is a powerful teacher. It tells you what matters. It sharpens your mind. It makes you careful. But it doesn't get to decide the path. And love is even more powerful. It's not the soft, romantic kind people like to package into stories. It's the fierce, unrelenting kind that makes you build for a future you might not even live to see. It's the kind that makes you protect something fragile because, deep down, you know it matters more than anyone can measure. Love for the planet. Love for the species. Love for the small, brilliant possibilities that lie hidden in tomorrow. Emotion at its core is energy. Neuroscience confirms this in subtle ways. Emotional states shift neural activity, alter hormonal balance, sharpen or cloud cognition. They are not abstract ideas. They are biochemical forces, shaping thought and behavior with precision. When you stand at the edge of something monumental, it's emotion that gives that moment its weight. If it were just logic, the moment would pass like any other line of code or equation. But when emotion threads through a mission, it leaves fingerprints on everything. On the way a team works, on the way risks are taken, on the way failure is endured. The emotional side of leadership isn't about grand gestures. It's about invisible resilience. It's about waking up every day with the weight of your vision pressing on your chest and deciding, again and again, to stand up and carry it. And when you do, the world doesn't see the heaviness in your lungs, the ache behind your steady voice. It sees the outcome. It sees the steel, the fire, the certainty. But beneath that certainty lives a very human, very emotional heart. That's what gives it power. That's what makes it real. In the quiet moments, when the noise fades and the world isn't watching, what remains isn't the applause or the criticism. It's the emotion. It's the reason you began. It's the trembling inside that says, this matters. And that, more than anything, is what carries a dream from fragile idea to undeniable reality. When you spend years walking this kind of path, you start to understand that emotion isn't a liability. It's a compass. It doesn't always tell you what's easy. It tells you what's meaningful. And meaning is a far more powerful motivator than comfort will ever be. Meaning is what keeps your hands working when logic says stop. Meaning is what makes sleepless nights feel less like sacrifice and more like inevitability. It's what makes people build, create, endure, even when the odds laugh in their faces. And that kind of emotion doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It whispers in your chest like a steady drumbeat, don't stop. There's a powerful truth hidden in the way our brains work. Emotions don't just live in the mind. They live in the body. They shape breathing patterns, heart rate, even the way we hold ourselves. When someone is deeply connected to what they're building, you can feel it before they speak. Their entire nervous system is vibrating with alignment between inner emotion and outer purpose. That alignment is what makes ordinary work feel like destiny. But with that alignment also comes vulnerability. When your heart is tethered to a mission, failure doesn't just feel like a setback. It feels like a fracture. Every failed launch, every delayed milestone, every miscalculated risk isn't just data, it's pain. The kind that doesn't always have language. And in those moments, emotion isn't a soft thing. It's a raw, tearing thing. It tests every fiber of your being. Many people imagine resilience as a kind of unshakable confidence. But in truth, resilience is born in these moments of emotional fracture. It's the quiet rebuilding of your inner architecture after the weight of failure has cracked it. It's the decision to keep going not because you feel strong, but precisely because you feel everything, and still choose to rise. I felt that fracture more times than I can count. There were days when the silence after a failure felt louder than any explosion. When even the lights in the room seemed to flicker with the weight of disappointment. Those are the moments when the world doesn't applaud. It doesn't comfort. It simply watches. And you, alone with your emotions, have to decide whether this is where the story ends or where it gets rewritten. Science can describe the chemical cascades of such moments. The flood of cortisol, the racing of the heart, the tightening of the chest. But what it can't fully describe is the way emotion reshapes identity in those moments. You don't just recover. You evolve. You become something harder to break. Not because you stop feeling, but because you learn to feel and keep moving. When I look back, some of the most pivotal turning points weren't the successes. They were the emotional implosions that forced a choice. To collapse or to rebuild. To drown in the noise or to rise with a quieter, sharper kind of determination. Every leap forward began in the shadows of those emotional storms. And through it all, there's an emotional constant that rarely changes: the deep, unshakable love for possibility. It's a love that doesn't fade when things break. It's a love that doesn't depend on applause or validation. It's the kind of love that keeps burning when the room goes dark. That kind of love is dangerous too. It can consume you if you're not careful. It can make you forget to breathe, to rest, to be human. That's one of the hardest lessons of ambition. That loving something so fiercely can blur the boundaries between purpose and self. You can wake up one day and realize that you're no longer carrying the mission. The mission is carrying you, dragging you through sleepless nights and empty rooms. Emotion gives power, but it also demands honesty. You can't outrun the emotional cost of a dream. You can only learn to carry it better. And the way you carry it changes everything. Not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. When people look at those who lead ambitious missions, they often imagine a single figure at the center. But what they don't see is the emotional ripple effect. Every person drawn into a vision feels its emotional gravity. Teams don't just follow plans, they follow energy. If the energy is cold, mechanical, transactional, the work will reflect it. But if the energy is real, if it's tethered to something deeply human, people move differently. They give more of themselves. They begin to feel the mission, not just understand it. That's when innovation turns from a strategy into a living force. I've seen this firsthand, how one person's emotional conviction can light up a room full of exhausted engineers, can turn skepticism into cautious hope, and hope into belief. Not because of any technical argument, but because emotion has a frequency logic can't replicate. It speaks to something deeper in us. It's how species survive, how civilizations rise, how impossible things are quietly, stubbornly made real. But to lead with emotion, you also have to be willing to walk through darkness. The human nervous system wasn't built for constant pressure at this scale. It wasn't designed to shoulder the weight of entire futures on its back. There are moments when the mind simply fractures under it, when even breathing feels like lifting stone, when the idea of continuing feels absurd. And yet, something happens in those moments that no algorithm, no model, no chart can predict. The same emotion that breaks you can also rebuild you, not because it disappears, but because it teaches you how to stand differently. Emotional pain is a sculptor. It doesn't erase what you were, it shapes what you become. There was a period of my life when I thought emotional detachment was strength. That feeling less meant breaking less. That if I could strip away emotion, I could become something invulnerable, efficient, unstoppable. I was wrong. Detachment doesn't make you strong. It makes you hollow. Real strength isn't about feeling less. It's about learning how to feel deeply without letting those feelings drown you. It's about standing at the edge of your own breaking point, breathing through it, and whispering, "Not yet. Not like this." It's about staying human in a world that keeps asking you to become something more than human. I've met people who've lost their connection to that emotional core in their pursuit of greatness. They became brilliant architects of systems, but strangers to their own souls. They forgot why they began. They stopped feeling the weight of their own work. And when that happens, innovation turns cold. The fire that once burned bright becomes routine. That's why I've learned to return, again and again, to the emotional roots of everything, the why behind the how, the heartbeat beneath the hardware. Because emotion isn't just what starts a mission. It's what keeps it alive long after the novelty fades. It's the part of the story that doesn't rust, doesn't decay, doesn't lose its pulse when the world stops watching. Some of the most important breakthroughs in my life didn't come from moments of clarity. They came from moments of pain. Pain forces a kind of honesty that success never will. Pain strips away illusions. It shows you what truly matters. It sharpens your vision. And in that raw clarity, emotion becomes a weapon, not one of destruction, but of persistence. When a person has been through enough emotional storms, something changes in their eyes. They stop being afraid of the thunder. They stop running from the dark. Because they've learned something most people never do. Emotion isn't an obstacle on the path to greatness. It is the path. In neuroscience, we often speak about emotional regulation, as if it were the suppression of emotion. But true regulation is integration. It's learning to weave emotion into action, to let it inform but not control, to let it shape without swallowing. It's one of the most powerful human skills we can cultivate, and it's at the heart of every meaningful mission. The brain is a remarkable machine, but the heart, the emotional self, gives it purpose. It turns problem-solving into storytelling. It turns engineering into legacy. It turns fear into movement. And it turns uncertainty into fuel. I remember once standing alone in a massive hangar, staring at the skeletal frame of something that was supposed to defy gravity. The room was empty except for the quiet ticking of distant machinery. In that stillness, the sheer insanity of it all hit me. The logic said it shouldn't work. The probabilities said it wouldn't. And yet, there was something deeper, a visceral, almost primal emotional certainty that whispered, it has to. That whisper isn't logic. It's not data. It's something older. Something rooted in the very structure of human survival. It's the same whisper that told people to light the first fires, to cross unknown oceans, to build bridges where no land met. Emotion is the oldest navigator we have. When everything is uncertain, emotion becomes the last thread connecting us to possibility. And if you learn to hold that thread, not too tight, not too loose, it will guide you through storms logic can't map. But here's the hardest part. The world doesn't always reward emotion. It rewards results. It praises certainty, numbers, performance. And so people learn to bury their emotions beneath polished answers. They build armor around their hearts, layer by layer, until no one can see what burns underneath. And yet, it's precisely that hidden fire that gives meaning to the numbers the world celebrates. Every great leap, every technological triumph, every scientific breakthrough, every impossible mission that became real, was built not just on intellect, but on emotion powerful enough to outlast failure. This is why I've learned to stop pretending that emotion is something separate from achievement. It's not a shadow to be hidden. It's the light beneath everything. If you strip it away, what's left might function, but it will never truly live. The people who change the world are rarely the ones who feel the least. They're the ones who feel too much and learn to carry it anyway. They're the ones who let emotion fuel the engine without letting it burn the structure down. They're the ones who build, not just because they can, but because something inside them refuses to let go. And in that refusal, they find their strength. There's an invisible cost to feeling deeply, though. The more your heart is tied to a mission, the more exposed you become to the storms it brings. The emotional toll of carrying something bigger than yourself isn't measured in headlines or numbers. It's measured in the quiet spaces between breaths. It's measured in the nights when no one sees your face, in the private questions you ask yourself when the lights are off. People sometimes think that passion is this bright, endless flame that burns clean and steady, but in reality it flickers. It's messy. It burns unevenly. There are nights when it feels like a roar, and others when it's barely a spark. That's normal. That's human. The fire doesn't disappear because it dims. It's in those fragile moments, when you almost can't feel it anymore, that you learn what it truly means to keep going. Some of the most defining decisions of my life were made in silence, not in boardrooms, not under spotlights, not in the glow of triumph. They were made sitting alone, with the quiet ache of exhaustion in my chest, when everything felt uncertain and small. Those moments don't make it into the documentaries or the speeches, but they are the backbone of everything. Emotions at that level don't shout. They whisper. They ask you hard questions. Is it still worth it? Do you still believe? Are you still willing to break your heart for this? And each time, the answer has never come from calculation. It has come from something far deeper. A kind of emotional gravity pulling me forward, even when every logical part of me screamed to let go. I've learned that emotion doesn't just make us human. It makes us relentless. Because while logic is excellent at measuring risk, only emotion can measure meaning. And meaning is what keeps you standing when the ground shakes. To lead is to carry emotion like a current under your skin. It never fully rests. It hums beneath every conversation, every risk, every failure, every triumph. And it's not just your emotion. It's the emotion of everyone who's tied their hope to your vision. Leadership isn't just about decisions. It's about emotional stewardship. It's about understanding the invisible weight others have placed in your hands and carrying it with quiet, steady strength. This weight doesn't make you invincible. It makes you human in a way that is both extraordinary and excruciating. And yet, that's exactly why it matters. If the path were easy, it wouldn't shape anything real. If it were simple, it wouldn't require the kind of emotional courage that leaves fingerprints on the future. I've stood on launch pads and factory floors, in operating rooms and silent conference spaces, and the feeling is always the same before something big happens. A stillness, a kind of suspended breath, and in that stillness, emotion is louder than any sound. The fear, the hope, the memory of every failure, the quiet, defiant belief that this impossible thing might just work. That feeling isn't something you can fake. It's carved over time, in the deepest chambers of your being. And when you step into that moment, you don't step as a flawless machine. You step as a human being carrying the echoes of every emotion you've ever felt. That's what makes the moment real. That's what makes it matter. People often ask what drives someone to keep going after impossible setbacks. The answer is simple but rarely spoken: emotion. Not greed, not glory, not perfection. Emotion. That stubborn, fragile, beautiful thing that lives beneath all the steel. When you feel that deeply, failure doesn't just teach you. It reshapes you. It becomes a language you start to understand. And once you've learned to speak in that language, you stop fearing it. You begin to see that every fall is part of the architecture of something greater. The mind can be trained to endure, but the heart, it learns to believe again, even when it's been broken, even when it's tired, even when the world stops believing with you. That is the power of emotion. It's quiet, but it's indestructible. I think the greatest misconception people have about emotion is that it belongs in private, that it's something to be hidden, managed, controlled. But emotion is not the enemy of progress. It's the architect of it. It's what makes people fight for a cause, build the impossible, refuse to give up when giving up would be easier. Emotion is what writes the hidden story beneath every headline the world reads. And if you trace the lines of any great innovation, you'll find it. Not just in the equations or the strategies, but in the quiet heartbreak that came before the breakthrough. In the shaky hands that built something no one believed in. In the whispered promises to keep trying, even when everything fell apart. I've spent years surrounded by technology, by data, by the mechanical certainty of machines. But nothing has ever been more powerful than the human emotional engine. It's unpredictable, it's messy, but it's unstoppable. You can calculate everything, optimize everything, build something flawless on paper, and still, without emotion, It will lack the spark that makes it truly alive. Emotion is what turns survival into purpose. It's what turns ambition into legacy. And it's what turns people into forces that reshape the world. But to hold emotion at this scale, you must also learn to respect it, to let it breathe, to let it rest. You can't sprint forever with your heart on fire. There have been times when I thought I could. Times when I pushed until my own humanity cracked. And those cracks, they teach you. They teach you that emotion isn't infinite. It must be nurtured, not exploited. If you burn too hot for too long, even the brightest fire becomes ash. Real strength isn't about burning endlessly. It's about knowing when to protect the flame. The truth is, the emotional side of all this has never been a performance. It's not polished. It's not rehearsed. It's real. It's raw. It's the trembling beneath the steel, the heartbeat beneath the blueprints, the quiet beneath the roar. And I know, that's what makes any of this matter. The rockets, the machines, the algorithms, the numbers, they're extraordinary. But without emotion, they're just artifacts. What makes them alive is the emotion that built them. The emotion that believed in them when no one else did. I've seen people break. I've seen people rise. I've felt both. And through it all, the lesson has been the same. Greatness isn't born in the absence of emotion. It's born in the embrace of it. So if you ever find yourself standing on the edge of something enormous, something that terrifies you and calls to you in equal measure, listen carefully, not to the noise of the world, not to the doubts or the numbers alone. Listen to the quiet tremor inside your chest. That's your compass. That's the part of you that doesn't need permission to dream. Let it guide you. Let it remind you that what you feel isn't weakness. It's proof that you're alive. Proof that your mission matters. Proof that beneath everything else, you're still human. And being human, that's not a limitation. It's the greatest strength you'll ever have. Because when the numbers don't add up, when the world says no, when the sky looks too far and the weight too heavy, it won't be logic that saves you. It'll be emotion. That quiet, powerful, unbreakable force that built everything worth building. So keep it close. Protect it. Let it breathe. Let it guide you through the dark. And when the time comes to step forward, let it burn. Not like a wildfire consuming you, but like a star lighting your way. That is what truly changes everything.